All right, welcome to Politics on this March 24, 2023. So glad to have you with me and also to have Arlen Grossman. I can see him. He's got his coffee. He is now sitting down and waving. So let's get him on screen. And Arlen, I also am going to have to unmute you. I actually muted you. So just remember, if you can, and let me just show everyone Arlen. There he is. Arlen, I don't know if you can unmute
Yes,
yourself.
just
There
did.
you go. I muted you because I could hear your background noise and I didn't want that to go over. So just be mindful of the fact that we can hear you live. And if you are going to be talking in the background, just mute yourself. You should see the mute button, or you could ask Nancy, your wife, who's been very, very helpful to you. I understand with the tech. So before we get into our debate, conversation, controversies, argument, drag out, drag down, kicking and screaming, fight, let's talk a little bit about Arlen Grossman, my good friend in Monterey, one of my great friends from Monterey, whom I miss greatly. And so let's just first of all talk about your challenges with tech, which you are very upfront about. You do ask your wife, who I think is probably in your same age cohort. So I don't want this to sound ageist, although it will. Are you challenged by tech because you're old? I mean, do you think that's the reason, Arlen?
I'd say that's a big part of it. Sure. I mean, I never was great to begin with, but being a little bit older, it probably doesn't help. Yeah.
But then how do you explain my father-in-law, my wife's dad, who, died about 10, 11 years ago in his mid 80s, and he was very good with computers. He had a lot of savvy with them, knew how to work them into his octogenarian years. I mean, is it just an exception? Listen, I don't mean to be playing devil's advocate. It is clear to me that tech is a language, and we all are best learning languages when we're young.
Well, that is true. And I'm probably better than your dad is. Of course, if he's deceased, that has something to do with it.
Yeah.
But
I'm not so sure. With him dead, you might, and it's my father-in-law. My dad was not good with computers, and he would always need his secretary to, stand behind him and, actually use the mouse. He was at the dawning of the computer age when he died, but that was not one of his skill sets. I remember him sitting there with those Mongol pencils, all sharpened, like 8 of them in a row, as he would work on his briefs, his legal briefs. So
well,
I do.
I will say I do know the basics at least. It's just when you get to things like Zoom and some of these fancier things, I'm a little bit rusty, or at least I haven't had a chance to learn yet.
I mean, we're talking about somebody who's extremely intelligent. Obviously, Arlen came up with a quotation quotient. I think the Herald on this note, and we'll talk about your letter. In fact, I'm going to just show it to everyone. There's Arlen's letter. And you know what? I'm going to just see if we can show it so you can see all of it, because I did a little bit of editing with the video, and I want to make sure you all can see all of that. Arlen, you can see all of it, but you can't see, and I really have to change the setup here, but now there's all of Arlen's letter for our viewers. And don't forget, and I always forget to tell you this, folks, but click subscribe, click like, please. The more who watch, the more who listen, the better for me. Okay, so that's why we're
And I
saying to
echo
do it.
that too. I hope more people will watch and observe your show. That'd be great.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Arlen, very, very much. Arlen, always a great supporter and here with me now, which I appreciate. So there's your letter. We'll get to that in just a moment. But so I did have another question about, what was it, about Zoom? I can't. All right. So quotation quotient and the Monterey Herald. This is a letter that was in the Herald a couple days ago. They should be paying you a columnist fee. I Googled your name there in the search engine of the Herald, and I guess it's not Googled because it wasn't Google, but I used their search engine to see how many of your letters and how often your name is. I don't know. You've got a letter every month, right? At a minimum.
Well, at least 3 or 4 a year. Yeah, I'd say that at least that much.
It seemed like this year you've really been more prolific in
Lately,
your,
probably right.
publishing. So way to go, Arlen. Oh, something I forgot to do, folks. I do apologize. So I'll just say Arlen's name a lot. I was going to put, and Arlen, I don't know if you've been watching any of my videos. I'm really trying to have a professional look to them. So I should have a little name tag for you. I'll see if I can get one so that, it pops on the screen. It says Arlen Grossman, Monterey, that kind of thing. I didn't do that for this. I was so busy getting this program ready. All right, let's talk about Ukraine. Arlen and I disagree. We just don't share the same view. I'm of the mind we should not be involved in this conflict in terms of selling arms or giving arms or making it easier for Ukraine to fight what appears to be a stalemate and endless war. And you'll hear a video in just a moment. Arlen has a very different view as represented by the letter, which I discussed yesterday, and which, of course, I wanted to give Arlen the opportunity. I was critical of the letter. Arlen did not pull punches. I don't know if you watched it, but you might want to get a sense of, well, you didn't need, it's too late now, so you can't. But we'll play the video. And to me, this video is really strong support for my position, which is let's just stop our involvement with a thumb on the scale in support of Ukraine. Instead, let's involve ourselves as a peacemaking or peace pushing state, much like China right now. Here's the video. I hope folks can hear this. If they can, I'll change it.
Funerals of soldiers killed in Ukraine have become a daily occurrence as the fighting rages on. Both sides have been secretive about their respective casualty numbers. Kyiv has claimed to have lost 13,000 soldiers, while in September, Moscow said it had lost 6,000 of its men. But in reality, Western intelligence estimates that around 100,000 Ukrainian and 200,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or injured since the beginning of the war.
The offensives are lasting months. Lots of soldiers have been launching suicide attacks. It's like going back to trenches of the First World War. Hundreds of people are dying every day.
All right, I want to stop that right there because when I watched this video, Arlen, I'll play a little bit more of it, but I want your take on that. I was saying yesterday, and obviously I didn't create it, but I was pleased. I won't say pleased. I was gratified. By the way, we have John. I think we have John on. We'll get to you in a minute, John. I know you're on Arlen's side, so you guys are going to tag team against me. But I was appreciated the use of that term trench warfare because that is the term I used yesterday. This feels like, World War I, Great War, if you want to call it that, was the term before World War II. On the Western Front, where you had basically a stalemate, where you just had the troops shooting at each other. There's no man's land. There's tremendous devastation, and whoever launches an offensive is likely to be mowed down. Is this something we should be, perpetuating, Arlen? Because it seems clear that it couldn't happen without the continued supply of arms from the U.S. and to a lesser degree NATO allies into Ukraine. Is this something you think we need to continue?
I think we had no choice, Hal. I think we were just, we have to do it because it's the Russians who started the war, and we have to respond to that because Ukraine wants to defend their country and asks for our help, and we're giving it, and we have to continue to keep giving it, or there'll be worse consequences down the line.
I just don't understand that position. It seems to me as though you're saying, Arlen, that the only alternative to an endless stalemate, which has led to, now they said the headline's a little misleading on this. I just want to say, because at one point it said for the headline was 300,000 dead. And then later on, though, if you listen to this analyst, he's very, very clear that it's 300,000 casualties. So that's dead and injured, whichever way you interpret it. I'm going with the casualty figure because that's what is said. It's carnage. It's stalemate. Is that, I mean, I understand what you're saying. Well, we can't let Russia win. But is that the only alternative? Is the only alternative either hundreds of thousands dead, a country of 8 to 10 million people losing, 1%, more than 1% of its population, and then tremendous destruction to its state, its infrastructure, its land? Is that the only alternative to just waving Putin in and saying it's your country? Because I sure see all other alternatives, like what the Chinese are brokering right now or trying to. Arlen,
Well, yeah, I totally don't understand your view either, Hal, just like you don't understand mine. I think, Ukraine has asked for our help. We come in there and we're giving it to them. And if we don't do that, if they win, if they take over Ukraine, that would be
but
devastating.
why do you frame it, Arlen? And sorry to interrupt, I shouldn't do that, but you frame it as though those are our only choices. Either Russia takes all, or we have this stalemate. And to be real clear, what that means in terms of a stalemate is just death and destruction that never seems to that will not end.
Well, yeah, but Hal, there's really no middle ground that I can think of because, what Ukraine doesn't want to surrender. They want to keep their country.
But
They don't
why do you
want
call it
independence.
surrender? Why is a ceasefire surrender, Arlen? That's where I just don't get it. Why is trying to come up with some kind of a peace, or at least at this point, a breather? Why is that, in your view, tantamount to surrender?
Well, look at it this way, Al. Russia has their plan. They want to go in and totally take over the country and control Ukraine. So I don't see where they're going to back off from that. There's no indication that Putin would want to back off from that point of view. And as far as Ukraine, what's their middle ground? They just have to defend their country, and they want to keep all their land. They don't want to be taken over by Russia. So I just don't see a middle ground that both sides could possibly agree on. Oh, suddenly I lost you.
You know what? I do this, Arlen. I did this yesterday, and it was very frustrating for viewers, or viewer. As far as I could tell, there was one who called in, because I had my mic muted, and I'm sorry about that. Sometimes I'm tapping on my laptop or this case computer, and it can be disruptive. So I had muted myself. I forget. John, are you with me? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can
All
hear
right.
you. Can
And
you hear
by the
me?
way, John, thank you for calling in, and thank you so much for being quiet when I went to you, because I am having a little bit of a struggle making sure you can hear me, but we can't hear you. So you were a great caller inner. So good morning, and thanks for being up
Good
early. And
morning.
please weigh in.
And Hal, and so is this the same person that has been responding to your point of view on your website, or I'm sorry, on your Facebook page, which by the way is called the Hal Ginsberg Morning Show? And if you want to see some really lively discussion, take a look at that because we've got some great conversations going on. So I'm guessing this is John Norman.
Yes,
I don't know if there he is. He just self-identified. John, go ahead. The mic is yours.
we had quite a back and forth yesterday, and I wanted to point out something to you when I had said that Ukraine is voluntarily engaging with the Russians and trying to get their land back. You had brought up the fact that they had conscripted fighters, and then you posted a video of Yevgeny Prigozhin with some of the people that he had captured, stating that these young boys had been conscripted into the Ukrainian army. And I want to know, this is your source, you're the former prosecutor. What is the credibility of your witness, of your source, Yevgeny Prigozhin? The leader of Wagner Group.
John, there are a number of videos showing the impressment of troops, or of Ukrainians all across the web. You can find them. I'm not, I don't know. I'm not familiar with that particular individual that you're talking about. I assume you have information that they're not credible. I assume that's why you're asking the question. My understanding is that the Ukrainian government has not pointed to, has not denied that they are impressing or conscripting people into the military. Obviously, even if they aren't, but I'm going to just stick with that for now. we are seeing an unprecedented level of killing, deaths, and displacement in Ukraine. All the fighting is on Ukrainian soil, and it has been incredibly harmful to that country.
Okay, so I do remember when this conflict first began that President Zelensky said that all men of fighting age, and I believe that was, I don't know what it was, 16 to 65, something like that. I don't remember what it was. Said that they were to remain in Ukraine, and I think given the circumstances that they have an invading army coming in, and given the brutality of this army, their complete disregard for international law, their complete disregard for humanity. I mean, it seems, look at what they're doing, raping, murdering, kidnapping children, murdering civilians, like dragging men out of their houses and shooting them in front of their wife and kids. What's going on is more just like a giant crime. It's not even like a war. It's like a nightmare home invasion.
So let me cut you off there for a sec, John. War, and we've been through this. I don't, just like you question my source, I'm going to question to a degree your source. I believe the Western media is actually hell-bent, just as it was before the Iraq War, just as it was after we pulled out of Afghanistan, to paint the other side, or to paint those who we were at war with, or just before the Libya war. Remember, Gaddafi was going to go door to door, kill everyone in Benghazi. So I question our media's credibility as well. I think it's clearly demonstrated it's not always credible. But either way, what we're talking about is the ugliness of war, the devastation it's wreaking in this area. So again, why wouldn't you be calling for some kind of a peace, some kind of a ceasefire to stop it? Because obviously there's tremendous victimization here. And it seems to me, if you don't want people to be dragged out of their homes and shot, you don't want people to be raped, then let's stop it right now, as the Chinese are trying to do. Arlen, go ahead. Wait, John, let Arlen get a word in, and then we'll go back to you. I don't want to monopolize.
All right, excuse me, Al, but I think that, you make it sound like each country, is in the same spot. Let's not forget it was Russia that invaded Ukraine, and it's not like that they have a choice but to defend their country. They have to defend their country. That's what they want to do. They've given every impression that they want to continue to do that, despite all the destruction. So, there's really no choice for them. And for the it's for the Russians, they do have a choice. They didn't have to invade, and they could pull out now anytime they want.
John, go ahead, and then I'm going to respond. And then, John, I'm going to give you a response, and then I'm going to let you go, because I do want to move on. I'm going to respond to Arlen and you, and then we'll have Arlen's final word, and then we're going to move on. But John, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that throughout the negotiating process, they have sat down with Russia many times at the negotiating table, and they thought they struck maybe a small deal with Russia, and then immediately Russia goes back on it. And then one of the times that the Ukrainian negotiators showed up, they were actually both poisoned, and nobody knows who did it. Of course, there's no evidence. They don't have any evidence the Russians did it, but it's very consistent with, even when you look at the prelude to this war, when they captured Crimea, they had a ceasefire agreement, and then they started building up troops on their border and invaded them. So as far as, finding some sort of diplomatic solution, Hal, I think just based on that, it's not going to happen. And to think that it is it's like, why even go there? The Russians are not going to negotiate in good faith at all. It's not going to happen.
All right, John, I appreciate very much your call. Thank you. You have a great day. Please keep listening if you can. I really appreciate it. Hope I gave him a fair shake. I think I did. Arlen, I'm trying very much to be fair to everybody here. Just a real quick response. Look, we have hardly got clean hands. The suggestion is somehow that we're the ones who are just, or the West or Ukraine is somehow innocent. And I just, again, don't see that. Even blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, the evidence is very strong. It was U.S. Involvement, was an act of war. It was against an ally, Germany, as well as against Russia. It was devastating for the people of Western Europe, and it was clearly done, in my opinion, to benefit Western oil companies. So that's just one example of our bad faith. We have been pushing NATO ever eastward. The idea that this is some kind of holy national war for Ukraine does not acknowledge or does not take into the fact that Ukraine itself is a polyglot, that there are Russian-speaking sections. There has been a lot of dispute over who should be in charge, Russians or Ukrainians. There was a more pro-Russian premier some years ago, about a 10 or 12 years ago, who was deposed. So I think there's a lot of it's not as clear as you and John want it to look, that it's just the West's innocence up against this monstrous, and the terms you use, and that's why I have them highlighted here, are so tendentious, Arlen: confused letter writer, increasingly pro-Russian MAGA cultist. In other words, you can't disagree. I can't disagree with you without being a pro-Russian MAGA cultist. Now, I actually will acknowledge, I think Trump is more right on this than you are, but I don't think that makes me a pro-MAGA cultist. I mean, can't we have a disagreement without, with an accepting that we're each coming at this in good faith with a hope to get to a better result?
Well, Hal, if you want to, be on Russia's side, that's up to you. But I don't see what choice that Ukraine has.
Okay.
They did not start this
I'm
war.
not on Russia's side. I want the deaths to end. I want the killing to end. I want the raping to end. That's what I want.
I understand.
I don't see that as being on Russia's side. Hey, we've got another caller. I don't recognize that phone number, so go ahead and let's hear what you have to say.
Hi, my name is Wayne Morgan. I'm in Ventura, California, and I just tuned in because I happen to know Arlen. Anyway, my question to you, Hal, is what can what are the Ukrainians, the negotiation? What is Ukraine going to give up? Why should they give up anything? So how are you going to have some kind of a cease?
Well, first of all, I mean, I don't know why you're saying Ukrainians would be giving something up. I just put on the screen, I don't know if you can see it, Arlen. You can see it. Yeah. The idea that we're hearing, Wayne, and by the way, thanks for calling in. I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far, and I hope you'll continue to tune in even when I permanently ban Arlen from ever coming back or even calling, and I changed no, of course, Arlen's always welcome. So what would they be giving up? So one of the arguments that I've heard on this call is it's either, trench warfare, it's either World War I all over again, or it's Czechoslovakia, it's Munich, it's giving the country to basically a tyrant like a Hitler. So I put this map up. This is from the BBC, and let me get my little, folks can't see the date. This is I try to always make sure, Arlen, I'm very careful to make sure people know what my sources are, at least on this show. Although John was like, well, who's your source for them going in the streets of Kiev and grabbing people and throwing them into the military? So here's where we are right now, or at least we were 2 weeks ago, 9 March 2023. Pink is Russian occupied. Purple is where the fightings are. And then you see those red squares. That's the cities that are getting bombarded by Russian missiles. It doesn't look pretty for Ukraine yet. At the same time, the area that's occupied by Russian forces is not particularly populous. It's the eastern area. And if we stop the war, we go ahead and push for that ceasefire, which I believe Putin would jump for because he's seeing his troops getting mowed down just as much. And Wayne, just what I'm saying here is they'd be not giving up anything in the moment. What they'd be getting is precious time and safety and security so their cities aren't getting bombarded and so that their land in the east isn't being overrun. By the way, incredibly bloody killing fields. Now we're talking about for over 100 years, Arlen, from World War I to when Stalin had the collectivization there into World War II and then during the Cold War. This is a ground zero. This is one of the deadliest areas over the past 100 years to live. I'd like to see that end. I don't think some land for peace is necessarily the worst alternative. Wayne, go ahead and respond, and then I'll let Arlen come on.
Yeah, yeah, I don't see any motivation for Russia to negotiate. You know, and why should Ukraine negotiate? But the other thing I'm concerned about is China getting involved with this. They're aligning with Russia, and you know, in the future, you know, China could just be using Russia to build up, you know, against the West, and then later China just dumps Russia. You know, so I'm really concerned about that aspect also.
Well, if you're concerned about that, and I know I lied because I said, Arlen, you get in next, but just to be real quick, if you're concerned about China, rather, and I agree, China is the great global threat uh, to my way of thinking, along with the United States, not the great global threat to peace and to some kind of ecological, um, sustainability. I agree. China's our biggest fear. If you're worried about China being, getting influence and power, which they are, especially in the global South, which opposes this war, then I think that we have to take their place. We have to regain our hopefully traditional place as a peacemaker. Arlen, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I have a problem with the word war because just like in Iraq, we called it a war, but it's really just an invasion. It's one-sided. You know, Russia was the one that started this war. Russia went into Ukraine. So, it's just it's an unwarranted and illegal invasion by Russia to start with. All right. And the second thing is, how do you know what Russia is willing to do, what they're willing to negotiate for? If they're willing to give up something. As far as we know, we have no other indication otherwise. Russia just wants to totally take over Ukraine, and they've never said anything less than that.
All right, Wayne, final word from you, and then I'm going to let you go, and then we're going to move on. But anything else you wanted to add?
Well, I just want to agree with what John just said.
Well, that was Arlen, or John before Arlen.
Okay. Well, whoever was the last speaker, I agree with that position. Yep.
That was Arlen. I think because Arlen was making so much sense from your perspective, it must have been somebody else speaking. That's my only guess. Every time I try to get a guy to leave the meeting, then it seems like the meeting ends, which is very frustrating for me. I want to have like a permanent meeting on my dial pad, but it seems to be trouble because I think you'll hear a little noise now. I'm not clear. I thought I got rid of it. So Arlen, you should be impressed, by the way. Let me just pat myself on the back. It might give me myself a big praise with my tech savvy able to put this together. It's not that easy. It really isn't, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, I will give you some credit for that. It's not easy, and you're doing a good job. That technically speaking, it's just
the content is what is lacking, is clearly wrong-headed from Arlen's perspective. Arlen, let's talk a little bit about, let me see if I want to get I don't want to show the slides. I want to just show Arlen and me. Let's see if we can do this. And I'm going to be working on more and more scenes because the scenes are really the key. We do use here the software is called OBS Studio, is the broadcast software. So Arlen, are you doing your podcast? Because I know you had discussed a podcast. I'm wondering if that's coming along.
I'm just starting to try to learn how to do it. I've gotten instruction from Paul Carr, who does broadcasts and has done a lot of work to get that going, and he's helping me. And so it should be going on pretty soon, I would think. Although mine is going to be more on quotations and less on politics, at least just, as that's my plan right now anyway.
But I thought, Arlen, you were going to also be doing this with Paul. So I mean, do you need to do it on your own? Do you need to develop those skills on your own?
I'd be happy to do it with Paul, just like we did on your station, several years ago. And I thought we did a pretty good job and people seem to like it. So yeah, I'm open to that. It's just something we haven't discussed yet.
All right. Well, I wish you luck with that. I mean, that'd be very cool. And I just don't, it is challenging and it takes a lot of time. Also, I think, to be perfectly honest with you, Arlen, I'm having a little bit of a difficulty getting just the slide up. Or just Arlen. There we go. Let's see. There we go. There's Arlen, just Arlen. Yeah, I think that, to be honest with you, Arlen, here, doing a podcast. So the difference, let's get our terms right. A video cast or podcast, and I call them video cast. Well, let me ask you this. Will people see you or will they only hear you in your new venture?
You know something, Hal? I didn't even know what a video cast was. I didn't know you could do a podcast like you're doing right now, where you're on, people can see you. So these are things I have to learn. As we discussed before, I'm not technologically advanced, but I'm trying to learn. And
well, I just want to be clear that yes, the terms, the nomenclature is kind of important, just because when you talk to people, they may be confused. And I was always confused. My understanding is that a podcast is audio only. It is not video. A video cast is obviously with video and speaking. And I remember years ago, I was asked to do a podcast for an organization. And I was so confused because the individual who asked me to do it was really talking about a video cast. And I kept saying, well, you want video? What do you want? He's like, oh, I just want a podcast. And I'm like, well, and we couldn't really get straight because we didn't know what we each was talking about. So I take video cast means you have video. A podcast means you have just audio. A live stream is what we're doing now. A live stream is where you're actually talking live on the YouTube here in this case, but it could be on any platform. It could be at my website or what have you. So that's the difference. That's what a live stream is. And I love live streams because then I can talk to people. Then we get calls from Wayne. We get calls from John, right? Exactly. And sorry to forget you for just a moment there, John. You're not forgettable, but I did forget you. So I guess I really didn't forget. I forget. So that's kind of what we're talking about. So if you're just going to record in advance, and I think the hardest to do, actually, Arlen, by far, is a video cast, a pre-recorded video where we see you, where we can see visuals like the slides that I've been showing or the images. That to me is the most challenging of all, because you can edit it. You have to edit it. You can't do this. Could not really be a video cast. I'm going to leave it up. I hope people enjoy it. I think they will, but it couldn't be a video cast. If this were a video cast, I would have to go back to I'm in my studio. I'd have to stay in my studio and keep editing it and putting up what we call lower thirds. That's like what you'll see when you watch this. It says Arlen Grossman, Monterey Herald letter writer. You'll see my Halotix oval. Those are lower thirds. You need to do those. You need to edit them, and it's really hard. So I'm just saying, live streams are easiest. Then, in my opinion, although they require, then you have to do video. But I think maybe if you don't care about being seen, the podcast is easier because it's just audio.
I think I like what you're doing, Hal, and I think that's probably going to be the future if I had to guess, just because, podcast is just one thing. It's audio. But with the video cast, you could have both. You could have audio and video. And I think that I would guess that'd be more popular in the long run in the future than just a podcast.
It's more popular now. I mean, it's not even the future. It is now, Arlen. I think it's 10 to 1. There are 10 times as many live streams like what I do as there are podcasts. And it's not just that there are more of them. I mean, there's an exponential difference in the number of viewers. Now, they don't always watch live. I mean, what you see on YouTube a lot of times are people who had pre-recorded, or they just like this, right? Like you'll see a live stream, but you won't watch it live, if that makes sense. Because this is going to stay up there. So you could watch this in a year. Obviously, it wouldn't be live. But yes, it is much more popular. So if that's what you're looking for, is to have the widest audience, you got to use the video. Or
Well, you've given me an idea, Hal, and that's probably the direction I will eventually go.
So,
if I don't start out just podcasting, I'll probably eventually end up doing what you're doing.
all right, so we're going to go back into the slide deck, and I think you could see the slide the whole time, Arlen. When you watch this, I hope you will. I want your feedback, by the way. You'll see that the last conversation, it was just the two of us, and I want to get back to Trump. We're keeping you on, Arlen. You can leave. Generally, these go 45 minutes to an hour. This may be a little longer in terms of at the higher end of that spectrum. I'm never going to go over an hour, folks. I just won't do that to you. It's not fair. But this may be a little bit longer than my 35, 40-minute ones, especially because, well, we have Arlen. Also, we've had the great callers, and you can see the phone numbers obviously on the screen, 240-363-7190. So Trump mocked after revealing his plan to end Ukraine war, knock heads and get it done. To me, Arlen, this is, again, you can see this is from the Independent, a Guardian-owned Sunday paper in London that has been anti-Trump. I mean, let's face it, they don't like Trump. I assume you agree with the mocking. You think Trump deserves to be, shamed in the public square whenever possible. You must be. Are you disappointed, by the way? For let me digress here. We haven't had that frog march yet of Trump into the tombs in New York City. That must be painful for you.
Well, I think he was crazier than ever, if that's even possible, yesterday. The things he was saying about, Attorney General Bragg and all the prosecutors, and making it sound like they were worse than Hitler. And the smart thing to do, according to him, would be probably just have an insurrection like they did on January the 6th. And he's just getting worse, if that's possible.
All right. Well, I noticed you dodged my question, which was how disappointed you must be at this point that Trump isn't behind bars. But you know what? Hold you, he might be next week. I mean, look, we kept hearing about Mueller was going to bring indictments against him, and he never did. But this looked like it was more likely Trump himself saying that the illegal payoff to Stormy Daniels, not to talk about their affair, was warranted him being jailed, as opposed to, say, locking people up who were trying to cross the border legally. That, to me, if you want to arrest somebody, arrest them for violating constitutional rights. Arrest Obama for killing civilians with drone strikes that aren't authorized. To me, those are legitimate. Arrest Cheney Bush for torturing people. Those are good reasons to arrest someone. Trying to keep your sex worker girlfriend from going public, that doesn't really push the dial in Hal's world. But maybe you feel differently, Arlen.
I have a theory, and I'm surprised other people are not using the same theory, that the reason Bragg isn't going ahead very quickly with, charging Trump is because I think he doesn't have the strongest case in the world, the best case in the world. So I think he's waiting to get others like Georgia and, all his other possible prosecutions more closer to his or ahead of his. And I think that's maybe what he's trying to do, in my opinion.
I mean, I guess, we don't know. We don't know, Arlen. Let's talk about mocking Trump, though, for his war plan or not mocking him. You think it's a bad idea. We've already kind of talked about this, right? There's no point in even trying to knock heads and get it. So let's look at this. Now, see, here's what Trump had to say to the independent. The saddest part about the war is that it should have never happened. I think that's a fair statement. You don't have a problem with that, do you, Arlen? I mean, it's
Really
obviously
not.
started.
Russia started it. That was clear.
And then he goes on to say, so how do we end it? Which seems to me I'm with him. I know you're not. I mean, you're with him in the sense, well, we end it by driving Putin into the sea, right into the Arctic Ocean. Trump's maybe a little more realistic here. He says you have to knock heads and you have to get done. You need to say things to Putin and say things to Zelensky. Get him in a room, and maybe we can get somewhere. And of course, Twitter users had a field day with what is called a simplistic solution. I assume you agree that it's a simplistic solution.
Well, first of all, don't misunderstand how I, of course, would like to see a ceasefire. I would like to see peace. I just don't see how it's possible to be done. That's the problem.
Well, you see peace only if Russia withdraws completely, right? I mean, there's no other solution as far as you're concerned.
Well, yeah, I think that's about correct. Yeah.
So let's look at some histories, some examples from history where, I mean, this is to me cherry picking, shooting fish in the barrel. It's not really fair to you, Arlen, but look at this. Cold War over. How did this happen? How did these traditional enemies, you can see them there, Reagan and Gorby, how did this end? Well, you know what? What did Reagan say? And by the way, far from my favorite president, you talk to people. You don't talk about them. You don't say, oh, he's a tyrant. He's a Nazi. This is Munich all over again. You talk to people. That's what the great communicator said. And guess what? We had peace. We finally managed to create some real reduction in the tension in the planet's risk of thermonuclear war because Gorbachev and Reagan, shown in that picture, talked. They talked at Reykjavik. They talked in other places too. So doesn't that strongly counsel in favor of negotiating right now, Arlen?
Yeah, but I don't know about you, but I have not heard Russia say they want to talk to us. I haven't heard anything like that.
Have we tried? I don't think that's true. I think there have been several, and we heard it before from John, several halting efforts. Right now, what the White House spokesperson said, and I don't have the clip here, is no, we're not talking. No, there's no point. The preconditions. The precondition is you withdraw. That's not how you have discussions. There weren't preconditions when Reagan and Gorbachev spoke. They spoke, and as a result of the continued meetings, they got to a better place. Did they solve all the problems? No, obviously we're still, right now, we're back at war with Russia, but there was, for quite a while, real tension ratcheting down. All right, I want to just go ahead.
I have no problem with them getting together and talking. That'd be great. I just don't see any indication yet that Russia would take anything less than just what they wanted to begin with, which was to take over Ukraine and make them part of the Russian Empire.
So you don't think there was any perhaps concerns on the Russian side that might be legitimate, that they were being hemmed in, that there was this country right on their borders, Ukraine, that was a pool, that was a reservoir for Western military materiel, that the West never guaranteed Russia that we would not continue to expand NATO, even though its original vision was to protect west of the Iron Curtain, which has obviously been broken down, and there's no Iron Curtain. You don't think that there's any, that Putin might have some reason for being a little bit afraid of continued westward expansion?
Well, I don't know about that.
Westward expansion east in terms of NATO.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't hear that exactly from Russia, but they just started invading. No one asked them to, but they decided this is what we're going to do. And by the way, Hal, I learned something interesting yesterday from, of all people, Billy Sunshine, Billy Gorson in Santa Cruz. Mm-hmm. Something I didn't know is that Ukraine had nuclear weapons. In fact, they were the third largest holder of nuclear weapons in the world, but they decided voluntarily to give them up. And part of the reason was because they were having assurance from the U.S., United Kingdom, and Russia that nobody would invade them and that they would be fine. And look what happened. Russia just went right into Ukraine and didn't really you know, if Ukraine had those nuclear weapons, I don't think Russia would have gone in. But they voluntarily said, we'll give them up. You know, we're peaceful. We'll give them up.
Well, that's a really interesting analysis from Mr. Sunshine. I'd have to read, I'd have to look into that because like you, I'm not aware of that, Arlen. So I would have to be, I'd have to educate myself. I mean, far be it for me to ever doubt anything that Billy says, but I still would want to read the fine print.
Well, I printed them out for myself and, from the New York Times and other places. And apparently this was just after the Cold War ended. That's when, it was just right after the Cold War ended. That's when they decided they would voluntarily give up their nuclear weapons. So I could send you certainly those references.
I like to be good to see those. And by the way, I've got to change my screen a little bit because Arlen, and by the way, Arlen, your video is excellent. You look better than I do. So we've got to change that. I don't quite understand.
But your video ages people, though. I noticed it makes me seem like 30 years older than I really am.
I was going to say Arlen is 37 years old.
Yeah,
it's astonishing that you can look that ancient and be so young. I mean, who could have seen that coming?
See if you can fix that, Hal. Make me look a little bit younger, please.
No, I'm really upset now because is it my camera? I'm using this very good Logitech high-end camera that usually shows me clearly, but for some reason I am coming in vaguely. All right, we're getting towards. Go ahead. By the way, if people want to call 240-363-7190, 240-363-7190. I want to just show just a couple more things. Actually, Arlen, and I got to plug. Okay, excuse me, folks. Let me make sure my laptop doesn't die. I've got to always plug it in. And maybe that was why you know what the problem was, Arlen? I just discovered, I think, is my laptop was dying. And as a result, the camera didn't show me well, but hopefully now it's a little better. We'll see. Okay. So another peace deal right here, the Camp David Accords. We got two people in a room, traditional enemies for Arlen. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're Jewish. I'm Jewish. Thousands of years. I remember my Exodus. I think that was a conflict between the Jews and the Egyptians. I don't want to call them Israelis, the Hebrews, whatever term you want to use, but the spiritual and spiritual ancestors of the Israelis and the actual ancestors of the Egyptians back, to 1000 BC, whatever year it was. I don't know, when the Jews fled, and that we saw it. Actually, they had movies. Charlton Heston apparently bared a very close resemblance to Moses. Good looking guy. So we have this peace that broke out in 1978 because we had a U.S. president, Jimmy Carter, who got Menachem Begin in a room with Anwar al-Sadat and said, you guys are going to make peace. So again, it seems to me negotiating is the way to go.
By the way, Hal, has Russia asked Ukraine to negotiate?
Well, I think there is I don't know the answer to that question. I can't answer. Did Sadat ask Begin to negotiate or vice versa? I mean, remember, they had just been in a hot war 5 years earlier in 73 that was brutal. It was a brutal war. And I don't think there were any preconditions. Egypt didn't say you have to give us back the Sinai, which you stole from us in 67. I mean, obviously Israel would see it differently, but that wasn't a precondition of that war, the negotiating. There were no preconditions. They just said, we're going to talk. And in the end, peace broke out.
Well, that was a different era. Things have changed since then. And we're living in a world that it seems to be a little bit tougher to negotiate with, but I think it's important that Russia has not asked for any negotiations. Russia has not said they would accept less than totally controlling Ukraine. So I think that's something we have to consider.
All right. Well, Arlen is a tough nut to crack, but I think it's clear from you've been hearing that he's starting to understand he's been wrong. And we all appreciate that, Arlen. Thank you so much. All right, let's get to a few more. Now we're almost done, and we will not have a response. No, let me say it this way: you are a worthy adversary, intellectual adversary, Arlen, and I do learn from you. And I'm not rejecting out of hand your position altogether. That said, no, I think our efforts should be towards reducing, tamping down, ending the killing, the violence, and all the ugliness of war, rather than, as I see it now, exacerbating it, accelerating it.
I feel the same way. I feel the same way. I think, negotiation would be great. Stopping the fighting would be great, but I just don't see how it's going to be done. I haven't seen anybody, giving a good solution that would work.
All right. Well, we're just going to keep going here for another 10 minutes. This is the way not to go, Arlen. You don't issue arrest warrants. A trapped rat, a cornered rat, is the most dangerous kind. You start telling Putin that if we defeat you, you're going to jail. We might hang you like we would have hanged Hitler if we had if he hadn't taken the cyanide pills. So I think we agree, do we not, that this is not a good direction. This is not reducing tensions by threatening or by issuing arrest warrants. Or maybe you disagree.
Well, I kind of agree with you, Hal. I don't see the point of this because, for one thing, the United States is not part of the International Criminal Court, nor is Russia. So neither one, is even part of that group. So obviously Russia's not going to allow the International Court to come and take away Putin. That's not going to happen. So yeah, it's kind of just public relations. I think
it's performative more than anything else. Is that right, Arlen? It doesn't really.
Yeah.
All right. We've got Arlen Grossman. You can see Monterey Herald letter writer with us for a great rollicking hour. And I'm going to try to, by the way, folks, given what I believe to be the success of this discussion, I want to have Fridays for guests. So we're going to try to have because a lot of my Friday, most of my program, and I had one of my other listeners tell me they like it when I have guests on. So I take that, I take comments to heart. And so we'll try to continue that program where we have more callers on during, especially, and not just callers, guests, because callers, when you call in a guest, and again, Arlen, more nomenclature for you. You're a guest. John and Wayne were my callers today. So we'll try to keep, and I think you probably know that one pretty good from it hasn't changed from radio. We'll try to keep that going with more callers and guests, especially with the guests on Friday.
That's news to me, Hal, that you like to talk. I didn't know that.
So it's amazing. You have to do this. It's not because the dead air is the worst. And we get dead air when I mute myself. So, which some people may prefer. I don't necessarily.
Once in a while, you will let your guests come in for a few seconds, and I appreciate that.
That's true. And it is a few seconds. Let's be clear. We're not talking, right? Let's be real clear. So I want to move on to the economy, just a few very, very quickly, and also hopefully a final feel good for the weekend. So here's some, and this, by the way, goes with feel good. We are seeing, folks, some real improvements in the economy for working people. And see, Arlen, I fear that when we fight on the left over military issues, we let I don't say that war and peace isn't important, but we're forgetting about making a better economy for everyone but those at the very top. And I think that's what Democrats have to do, or someone has to do, or we're going to continue to see things get worse and worse. So
I think Joe Biden has done a reasonably well job doing that, keeping the economy going, and we have some good numbers in certain areas. So I'll give them that much credit, but the Republicans offer nothing that I'm aware of.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting you would say that, because I would tend to agree with you, although I think the Democratic Party has been far too willing to genuflect to Wall Street and big business as well. And Trump, let's not forget, really did start the tide against the quote free unquote trade deals that have been so harmful to our working class. That said, Biden has not reversed that policy and has continued with many of the tariffs that have helped our working class. I would have agreed with you, Arlen. I did not view the Trump economy as one, besides bringing some jobs back, as likely to be interventionist in the ways that I would like. But it's interesting, this EPI study says low wage workers have seen historically fast real wage growth in the pandemic business cycle. And they say that the hourly wage growth began to really increase and improve in 2019 and through 2022. So let's we not forget that in 2019 and 2020, Trump was the president. So obviously we saw. Now I didn't get into the great details they taught. I did read this article pretty closely. I was trying to figure out what policies they were talking about from Trump that might have helped, beyond obviously bringing jobs back, which he did to a degree, which he did with the tariffs and ending some of the trade deals or ending talk about them. I'm not clear on this, but nevertheless, if you're going to give credit during the time period when this happened, it started during the last Republican's presidency.
I disagree with you on that. I think let's not forget that Obama took over during a recession, or his economy was awful, and he turned things around and started to make the economy so much better. And that's when Trump came aboard. He just was able to inherit what Obama was doing and continue that.
We didn't see much wage growth during Obama's presidency. What we saw was the people at the top getting an ever bigger slice of the pie. At first, that stopped because the economy had gone, because of the crash. And a lot of it also has to do with the Wall Street prices. I'm not here to bash Obama anyway. I really just want to make this point, Arlen. I mean, I don't know how you get around the fact, and this is from the Progressive Economic Policy Institute, that they're saying right here that the hourly wage growth was strongest over the past, I think, 20, 30 years during the last 2 years of the Trump administration. How do you deal with that fact?
Well, my recollection is that when Obama took over, we were losing hundreds of thousands of jobs every month, and he was able to reverse that. And then people started to get jobs. They started to get more money. And like I said, that's when Trump came aboard, and he just continued those kind of policies. And
but that's not what this article is saying. This article is flat out saying that the start of the real wage growth finally began for working people, not when Obama was president, not when Trump first took office, which would suggest maybe it was a response to Obama era policies, but only in the last 2 years of the Trump administration is when it really took off.
Well, I don't even know what Trump did to improve the economy. He really just let things go, and we were
the trade deals, Arlen, and also there might have been a slight peace dividend. Remember, he did start the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and he did not start any new wars, so there may have been a slight peace dividend as well.
Yeah. And that's
I know that must stick in your craw. Any possible good that might have come during the Trump administration.
I can't imagine anything like that. But that you mentioned Afghanistan, and that is really tragic as far as I'm concerned. I'm not sure we really did the right thing by getting out, because look what's happening. That country is.
We were there for 20 years, and the country was within 2 or 3 weeks of our pullout. It's a shambles. Obviously, our occupation did nothing whatsoever for that country. It only hollowed it out completely.
All our wars and invasions have been a failure. I mean, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever.
Libya.
And 20 years is way too long for Afghanistan, but we should have at least done something to make sure that, the women and people in Afghanistan will at least have a chance to, make a decent country.
I don't know. I don't know how we would have done that. Let's see. We're just about winding up our program. I told you I wasn't going to keep people for more than an hour, so I'm not going to go into all the economic slides I have there. Just want to remind people, we always talk about feeling good. And Arlen, I don't know if you were watching those games yesterday, but they were really exciting. So the first one was awesome. Kansas State beating Michigan State at the buzzer. It was tremendous. And then I wanted to show this one real quick, Arlen. This may have been painful for you because UCLA went down. I don't know. Were you rooting for the Bruins in that game, or did you not really care?
I've always been a UCLA fan.
Well, I'm sorry to have to relive this memory, and it was not done to tweak you. Now, some might say, well, you were just trying to get Arlen's goat, just like you were the whole time. But not true. It was incredibly exciting. I would have shown it the other way as well, but let's just see if we can see these two videos, and then we'll call it a night or a day. I guess it's a day. It's a morning in Monterey. And thank you, Arlen. I know you got up early. I was up at 8:30 this morning, and I looked at my clock, and I thought, man, I got a couple hours, 2.5 hours. Poor Arlen. He's going to be up earlier than I am because it was 8:30 and you had to be up at like 7:40. So that must have been
hard.
Hard.
It was awful, but thank you, Hal, for the opportunity. I'm glad to be on with you, and thank you for your occasional nice words about me. They were rare, but there were a few.
Pish Tosh, I greatly appreciate your helping me out. There's no question about it. By the way, again, this is Haltix. And you can see the oval. I don't talk, I used to do this all the time on my show. I was constantly resetting, but I don't do that. I don't need to. This is one of the other nice things. If you have visual, Arlen, it kind of can save you from having to do the, by the way, I'm really annoyed that stupid screen share thing saying is on that screen. That's that thing. All right, let's go to the video here. This is the very end of UCLA and Gonzaga, a great, great game, which may have cost my son a little money because he had UCLA winning the championship. If they had won, Arlen, he would have been in line for a lot of money. No one could have beaten him if they won, but they didn't. So here we go.
Watson, their best defender, did not get back in the game because of this. So their best defenders on the bench.
It's a 17 seconds, three-pointer.
Bailey for the lead.
So UCLA, you're thinking they're going to win. And by the way, Arlen, great. That was great announcing, was it not? Oh, we got the wrong. I want to stop that. We don't want to see that. We already saw it. Let's see if we can get to the next slide. I have problems with my slide deck, by the way, sometimes, folks. So I think you caught that. So the UCLA goes up. It's amazing. And then let's see. And then what happens?
Hawkins has 29. They have not disappointed.
No, they have not. But if you're Gonzaga, you've got to take the first good shot you get. You're down one. This isn't a situation where you hold the ball for the last shot.
No, not at all, because you've also dominated the offensive glass. Chances are you'll get more than one opportunity. Walker for the lead.
Amazing. Incredible game.
Here comes Campbell. The other way. Stripped of the ball. Foul UCLA.
And they fouled, and then that was the end of the game. So Arlen, incredible game, incredibly exciting, and I just feel bad one of the teams had to lose, if you want to know the truth, because they're classy programs, never hear any problems with recruiting or anything else from either school. Seem like really good kids. That Tiger Campbell, I think he's a senior. He's been a great player for them. So, I mean, it's great sports, it's great drama, and it's just unfortunate one has to lose.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't paying attention. I didn't even realize that game was going on last night, and what you're telling me for the first time that UCLA lost, and that makes me feel bad. But funny thing is, I was watching Jimmy Kimmel the other night, and he's got an ongoing thing about Gonzaga is not a real school. They don't even exist. No one's heard of them before, except when it comes to basketball. So I'll have to check into that. If it's a real school or not.
I'm going to just state, and by the way, went over my hour. I'm sorry, folks. I really, really, really try not to do that. And I'll let Arlen have the last word, but I'm going to just confirm for you, Arlen, right now that Gonzaga does, in fact, exist. I have been to this campus of Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington. It shares a campus with Eastern Washington University, or maybe a different way to put it is they're cheek by jowl, right? The campuses are right against each other. So you can walk from Gonzaga onto the campus of Eastern Washington and vice versa, or at least the Eastern Washington University Spokane. So yes, Spokane exists, and so does the Gonzaga University. In fact, a friend of mine's son is currently a student there.
Well, thanks for confirming that, Hal. I kind of figured they were there somewhere up there in Washington, and you're confirming it, and that's fine.
I mean, I guess Jimmy Kimmel is going to have to go back to the drawing board with his jokes because clearly he messed that up. Thanks, Arlen. I'll be back to Monday. We'll be back Monday. You all have a great weekend. I want to thank again Arlen one more time for joining us. And I want to see, can I get myself? I want to just show myself here. I've got everyone but Hal, and I'm having trouble. So we'll just let it go. Thanks so much. And I'll see you guys Monday.